Hi everyone. Today I'm going to repaint this scope and I'm going to show you how I do that. I painted this scope the first time about 5 years ago, and I think overall it held up pretty well. There are some scratches and some scuff marks on it, but it's been 5 years, so I am actually happy with it. But I have to move it back a little. It's not really the right place where they put it, so I have to take it off anyways, and I might as well redo it so it looks good. So I have to sand this off and then start all over. I'm going to use a sponge. This is the sponge I bought. It's a little bit more expensive. I wanted to get the best thing that I can find, but you can probably use any kind of household sponges you have at home and you can experiment with those. The main thing you want, I think, is to have as many holes in it as possible so that it will sort of show up on your paint. Because I'm doing something brand new, I'm going to use this board. I'm going to practice on this first. Anytime you do something that you haven't done before, you should probably practice on a different surface so you know how it will show up, because what you think it will happen, it might not be the same way. Other than that, you need your paint. I got sandpaper, so this is the finest sandpaper that I could find, and this is what I will be using to sand off all this paint. And I have cotton balls and rubbing alcohol to do a final wipe down, and of course you need tape and scissors to tape over everything that you don't want to paint over, and a scope will have lots of things. And I actually got these cotton pads. I'm going to put this over the lens and then tape it. You want to make sure no paint will get in there. The only other thing I wanted to talk about is the two ways you can go about painting your scope. One way to do it is by taking it off the gun. That way everything is painted top to bottom all around, and you can put it back on this gun. You could put it back on a different gun. Those rings might go in different spots and it will not matter. So that's what I'm going to do. The downside is that you have to go and sight it in all over again. It probably won't be too hard, but still you have to do that. I don't really care because I already have to move my scope anyways. The other way is that you leave it on your gun. That's a lot quicker, easier. You don't have to take it off. You don't have to sight it in. The only problem is what I had, is that where the rings are, that's not going to be painted. And if the scope stays on this gun forever, then it's good. But this was on a different gun before. And when I purchased this gun and I got it put on, they put it in a different spot. So this is where the rings used to be, and this was black, and it just looked so ugly. And then I eventually just painted over with some green one day when I was out there camping. It doesn't look good, but it's better than the blacks. So if you're leaving it on your gun, that would be your downfall. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is take it off and then sand off everything. I just want to stop right now for a second and let you know ahead of time that this process has become very complicated and very long and often very frustrating, because I have made many mistakes. I did fix them all, but this video is going to be not only about repainting a scope, but also about how to fix your mistakes and possibly how to avoid making them the first place. Here I'm playing around with the sponge to see what kind of patterns I can create, and I noticed the prettier ones are the ones when the sponge was wet. And I tried to use this net and it just didn't really work that well. It's much better when you spray over it. So these are the different patterns that I came up with. Right here, I'm making my first mistake. I used the light green for the base coat, whereas I really should have used the dark green. And that's what I thought I did, but I had the caps mixed on the paint. And even though I sprayed it on the cardboard just to make sure it sprays okay, I just didn't notice I wasn't looking for the color and I just sprayed the whole thing, and I didn't realize this until much later, and I would have done things differently if I used the dark green for the base. And right here I'm using the net, and I am actually making my second mistake. I'm spraying it too heavily, so the net actually didn't really show up, as you can see, the way it's supposed to. This side is actually much better. When you use the net, you have to either stretch it out and hold it with gloves on, or you can tape it the way I did it. But as you see, it only looks good on one of the sides. Using the sponge is really not hard. It was actually really easy, and I thought it was working out really well. I made sure that the sponge is wet. The color just transfers better, and overall, I did like the pattern and everything, how it worked out. I'm curious if you see the huge mistake I made. I will let you know in just a minute what it was. But once I was done, I gave it a clear coat, and I also changed the brackets for the scope so I can move it closer to my eyes because it was too far. So I was able to do all that, and right now I'm looking at the gun and I'm looking at the scope, and the colors just don't match. And I actually could not believe it. I mean, this gun used to be green, and right now it looks brown. And I'm looking at the paint, and those are the two colors I used, and it seemed like it would have matched, but it just looks so off. So I found some old paint. It's not that old, but I've had it at home. It's a little bit more olive green, and I feel like I need to fix these things with this color, and hopefully everything will work out. But the more I was looking at that scope and that gun, the more it was bothering me that it just looked so green compared to the gun that it just really didn't look good. So I started painting over just the bottom, just with this olive green, and I wasn't really happy with it because I didn't want to cover the whole entire thing, but it just seemed like it wasn't enough. It was still green. So I added some black. I actually looked at the video when I first painted this scope. I tried to figure out what paint I used, and it was a simple olive green, black, and a light green. So I thought the black could actually help it, and it gave it a nice dimension, but I was still not happy with it. It still did not really match the gun, and I didn't want to paint the entire scope this color. You can see the difference between the top and the bottom, how the rest of it was really green, and now it was starting to be a little bit more olive and a little bit matching the gun a little more, but it still wasn't good enough. But I did like how it turned out. I mean, if it wasn't for the color, I would have been happy with it. So I went to Home Depot the next day, and I tried to get the most brownish color olive green that I could find, and this was the one. And I figured I'll just repaint the whole thing with that and some black. And I actually sanded off what I just painted on the bottom because I didn't want it to be so much paint. It just seemed like it was getting more and more. And there was plenty of time between these layers. I mean, this whole thing took me over a week to do. So I sanded it off, and I didn't sand off everything. I just sanded off that very top layer, so it's just a little bit less and a little bit smoother. I want to point out a couple of huge benefits of using the sponge. For one, this is perfect for fixing mistakes. So if you decided to do something totally different and you made some mistakes you couldn't fix, you can fix it with the sponge. You can also incorporate the sponge into your design so that just in case something happens, you can do that.
And another thing is, you don't have to wait between layers for them to dry. You can just do this in like 15-20 minutes. It's totally different than when you're spraying layers and layers on top of each other. Another potential problem this technique avoids is the paint bubbling. That happens sometimes, and I still haven't figured out exactly how to avoid it. In the beginning, I actually tried the net with the sponge, and it just didn't work out great. I mean, you couldn't really see the pattern of the net, but I thought I give it a try. I have already made so many mistakes, and I was just kind of frustrated, getting a little nervous. I said, might as well just try it, just to see how it would turn out. I thought maybe if I stretch it really well and hold it, it might actually work out great, but I just don't think it works. You actually have to spray the paint over the net if you want that to show up, kind of like that reptile snake look. With the sponge, I don't think it's ever going to work, but it was worth a try. So I'm basically covering the entire scope with the olive green, about maybe, I don't know, 90% of it. So I do leave a little bit of green peeking out, but almost all of it is this olive green. And I added a little black. And what I did was I made the sponge a little more wet, and that made the black paint to dilute, so it wasn't so dark. So this way it kind of blend in a little bit more, and I think it worked out pretty well. At the end, I used this brush mostly to just get into the corners because it would have been harder with the sponge. But I did paint some spots over the scope, but I wouldn't recommend using the brush like that because you're going to end up making it way too symmetrical and you might even overthink it. So I would just stick with the sponge to paint.
It is finally finished. This process has become very long, very complicated, and it was often frustrating. And I cannot believe how many mistakes I've made, but I did fix them all and I did learn from them. So I guess it was worth it. Honestly, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I mean, overall, I like the way it turned out. I like the actual look, but this is not what I wanted it to become. So this is a very simple look, which is great, but I wanted it to be a different design. I wanted it sort of a little bit here, a little bit here, just kind of a wraparound design is what I had in mind. And I can totally see how that would work. So I can try that in the future with other things. I am glad that I tried something new, and I just want to quickly recap the benefits of using a sponge. So, for one, it is very easy to use. You're not spraying the paint, so there's even less chances of it messing it up. I always say you can't really mess it up, but this you really can't mess it up. You just basically use 2 or 3 colors or maybe even more, and just keep going over it, and as you go along you can decide how you want it to look. So that's one thing. Another thing is, as I mentioned earlier, this is perfect for covering up mistakes. You don't have to paint over it as if you were spraying something, then you have to, cover it. You can just go over that little area with it, and it's not going to look like a cover up. So this is good to have on hand just in case you're doing something different and you make a mistake. You can just incorporate the sponge and it will look like you meant to do it. Another thing that I like is that it's very quick. You can literally do this in like 20 minutes because you don't have to wait a long time for the paint to dry in between, because you're going over different areas in the different layers. So it's quick. And another thing that I mentioned earlier, the paint bubbling, that is often a problem. It has happened to me so many times. I still don't really understand why it's happening, because it only happens in certain places. And I did some research and everything, and the next time I'm painting something, I will actually talk about it a little more, but I'm still figuring it out. And if that happens, you can actually go over it with the sponge and then it won't look like something standing out so much. So these are all great things, and you can experiment with different sponges and different techniques with the sponge, different colors. So overall, I am very happy that I have done this and learned all about it. So now all I have to do is go sight it in, and then I am going to go bear hunting this upcoming week. In the next few weeks, I'm going to paint two rifles. I already have them at my house. They belong to friends. They also have scopes on them, and they want me to paint the whole thing. So come back in a couple of weeks, take a look. They should be uploaded by then. Hopefully, you've learned something from this video, what to do, what not to do, and I'm hoping you found it beneficial. Leave me a comment and let me know if you have done this before or if you are going to do it now, or any comments you have. I mean, I do know that it does not 100% match the gun, so I know that, but if you have anything else you want to tell me, please do. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.